Thanks, Rifa. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for sticking around for the graveyard slot. Kind of the last one. That bit of meditation really helped me there, because I was about to speak to a room full of people, as Rifa said. Yeah, I'm Bex, as Rifa said. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Brandwatch. Brandwatch, we make B2B analytical software. Started out with social media data, but we go beyond that now. That's the last thing I'll say about Brandwatch. I'm going to risk an ad-lib open that is based on feeling inspired by the previous talks that I've seen here. So, Deborah talked about balance in the exec committee, in the exec team, and how the numbers themselves don't necessarily lead to a more kind of balanced debate happening. I've been on the exec team now at Brandwatch for about 18 months. It has changed a lot in that time. I was not the first woman on it. The first woman on it is a fantastic woman called Hind, but I was the joint third woman on there. We now have about 50-50, which is great and really, really a good step forward. But I have to say, without giving away too much of the kind of trust that you need as an exec team of what goes on in that room, being in that room, especially as we have some Brandwatchers here. So I think I counted 5. It is difficult. It is more difficult. The women do speak less. The women speak a lot less than the men in those meetings. I feel I'm in a position to speak quite a lot, because luckily for me, Brandwatch has really struggled to find a good head of product. And the product team is really performing well. So I've known Giles for a long time, our CEO. He and I have a lot of trust, but also he needs me. Because I run a good product team. So I use that to be a bit bolshier than some of the other people, because he's not going to fire me. She says. So I do speak up quite a lot about these things, and it is starting to make a difference. And it's encouraging the other women on the exec team to talk as well. So I just wanted to kind of add that in there, that it's going to take more than the numbers, but it also takes a feeling of safety. So I have that feeling of safety where I am. I'm very privileged that I have that feeling of safety. And not everyone has it, but if you do find yourself in a position where you have that feeling of safety and you're in that situation, I really encourage you to use it. Okay, so I call my talk Seeking Imperfection. You'll see why. I'm not a stranger to public speaking. I had to do it quite a lot for my job. Part of being Chief Product Officer is being an evangelist, which I kind of hate as a word. I started out as an analyst for a radio company, and they insisted on calling me a brand champion as an analyst. But it is part of my job, but this feels very different. I've only started to do this kind of talk quite recently, actually. And the reason it feels different is that normally I'm standing up here or wherever it is talking about something I have legitimate, measurable expertise in. So I'm an analyst by trade, I mentioned that, turn into a product person. I will be talking about research methodologies or types of digital data, things that are like really kind of factual and I have a right to talk about, earned the right to talk about. I feel a little bit like this at the moment, especially after the wonderful talks from everyone tonight. If Deborah is still here, I didn't get a chance to talk to her during the break because I was too busy trying to center myself for this, but I really want her to come and do some work with Brandwatch, so Rifa, we can make that happen afterwards. But this is kind of how I feel, because I have no expertise in talking about mental health, but that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm not a mental health professional. I've not studied it, other than for my own self-improvement. And so I do feel a little bit like, what the hell am I doing here? So Rifa mentioned the event that caused her to get introduced to me about a year ago, which was the 9% event. It's organised by a local woman called Georgina, and it's named after the gender pay gap. If you haven't been to it, I encourage it. It's one of those newer kind of groups that Rifa kind of referenced. And the brief was to talk about your career path and share any advice that you might have, for women in leadership, etc. And I'd never done a talk like that before, and I felt like when I sat down to plan it, there was really no way for me to do an honest job of it without talking about my mental health. So I did. I talked about what I'd been through, what I learned, what advice I give to other people, and I got this huge reaction from it, and I was asked, there was some Brandwatchers in the crowd that night, and I was asked to do it again at work, which was terrifying. So I'd only recently been promoted. I'd been recently joined the exec about 6 months before, and we'd been through this big merger, and so half the company didn't know me at all. And first thing I learned is mental health issues. But it worked out. So every time people would come up to me afterwards and say, oh, you know, that really helped, or they would like slack me and say this really helped, and they would start to sort of make me feel better about it, like I had a right to speak. And then they'd ask me for advice about what they were going through, and I'd be right back to feeling like this, because I'm like, why are you asking me? I had no idea, I just told you I struggle with this. I can't fix this for you, I can't answer this problem. So I shared this actually recently. Just been on holiday in Devon, which was lovely, so I'm a bit more relaxed than I normally would be. But a couple of weeks ago, I was having coffee with someone from work I'm mentoring, and I shared that I was worried about this, I was nervous about this event, because I felt like I didn't have a right to speak. And she told me that the reason that I had a right to speak was because I was exactly like everybody else, which was deeply comforting, but also kind of horrifying to be told that you're just like everybody else. I'll come back to that later. And the only difference between me and other people is that I was willing to talk about it. So, okay, I'll take that. So I'm going to introduce myself properly now. So I am Chief Product Officer at Brandwatch, but obviously that's not all that I am. I am also an analyst by trade, but also just infuriatingly in every moment of my life. I analyse everything. My husband is here and he's grinning because I drive him mad. TV adverts come on and I analyse it, like everything, it's unstoppable. So I mentioned my husband and my wife, I'm a sister and a daughter, my parents are here too, very supportive, they're all over there. And I love animals, you can see my dog Murray, chillers, I like baking, I like craft, I like gardening. I am a novice but enthusiastic amateur gardener. It's taken me 33 years to inherit the green fingers of my grandma, but my mum is trying to help me stop killing houseplants. And I'm also anxious. I suffer with not an officially diagnosed anxiety disorder, but I have been to the doctor for anxiety. I'm introverted naturally. I get, and by that I mean that in the truest sense, where I get energy from time spent alone rather than getting energy from time with other people. It doesn't mean I don't enjoy time with other people, but I get energy from time on my own. I'm a workaholic in the truest sense of the word. It's an addiction, and it's a problem. And I am a perfectionist. I'll talk about that a little bit. And I'm an obsessive overthinker. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about perfectionism because this is how I kind of consider myself. I am a recovering perfectionist. I'm trying to get over my perfectionism. So I've been a perfectionist for as long as I can remember. I think that I was born that way, not made that way. I remember having an epic homework tantrums because if I got most of the way through a piece of homework, and those of you who are the right age here will remember those eraser pens with the white tip and the blue tip, and you erase the ink with the white tip, but if you write over it too quickly it blotches. I would want to restart my entire homework if I had a blotch. And I remember one time having a full-on tantrum because Mum told me I had to go to bed and my homework was fine. And I wanted to redo it. So it's a problem, but I didn't think of it as a problem. I didn't think of it as a problem until quite recently, actually, like the last few years. I thought, well, I'm just got high standards, and I'm just driven, and I just work hard, and that's good. And it is good. You know, it's part of the reason that I'm Chief Product Officer, and I'm 33. So like, I'm proud of my achievements, but it's also a big problem. Like I didn't realize probably in my late 20s, early 30s, I was really heading towards a huge problem that I didn't have on my radar at all. No one talked to me about this, no one was talking to me about this, or no one was talking to me in a way that I heard. People were trying to talk to me about it. Mostly the people on that sofa over there were trying to talk to me about it. But I wasn't listening. So I lost touch with myself. I lost touch with my friends, my family, and my husband. My husband tried to talk to me about it so many times. I am so grateful that he stuck with it and stuck with me, rather than, you know, jettisoning me, because workaholism is just as bad as alcoholism in some ways. You know, if you're fully addicted to something, you're not a very nice person to be around. And I got there because I felt like I had to say yes to everything. If I wanted to prove myself, particularly as a woman, I had to be emotionless, I had to be unflappable, bulletproof, always growing, relentlessly growing. And it's not a good place to be. So what did I do? I can't remember what slide is next. Oh, there we go. So the first thing I did was went to counselling. I still go to counselling, and it's the best thing I've ever done, and it's definitely the most transformational thing. And the other thing I started to do is I turned my annoying analytical brain onto myself. So instead of analysing everything around me, I started to try and analyse me. And so I read books about it, things like white fragility that Rifa mentioned. I read books that were not directly about like what I was going through, but were about how humans relate to each other, expectations, judging each other, etc. And this one for me, this TED Talk, I love TED Talks, but this TED Talk was transformational, and I've quoted it a couple of times, but if you haven't watched it, you definitely should. Brene Brown, she actually has a Netflix special now as well, although I would say that this 15-minute talk is the most important thing for you to watch. She talks about the power of vulnerability, and I'm now going, she is an expert by the way, so she spent her life, she's a qualitative researcher, she spent her life learning about connection and shame and vulnerability and courage. So I just want to take those four things and use her definitions, because they really are a great framework for how you can try and live in a better way for your own mental health. So just like Joe said earlier, connection is really the most important thing. I think it's pretty much every human, apart from actual psychopaths, need connection with at least one other human. So it's fundamental, but it's also really scary. You make yourself, you risk being rejected if you try for a real connection with another human. And one of the things that's driving that is shame. So shame, in its kind of academic sense that's defined by Brené, is the fear that there is something about me that is so horrible that if you knew about it, you would find me unworthy of connection. And shame can come in different ways. So you can know what you're ashamed of. You can have done something or thought something terrible. And the difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is I did something bad. Shame is I am bad. So it could be because of something you did. Or you could be carrying shame and you have no idea why you're carrying shame. You have no idea. This is something I've talked to my counsellor about. Like, you can be carrying shame that's generational shame. Like, I have an amount of shame that comes from the fact that I'm a chief product officer, but 2 generations ago my family were completely working class, and I feel guilty for the amount of money and success I have. And therefore don't know how to spend it. So it's an interesting thing, shame, but real connection requires you to face that and tell someone else what you're potentially ashamed of so that you can connect with them. And that brings me on to courage. So courage, I used this picture so many times. I hope the person who took it never finds out. This is the best visual representation that I have of how I used to think about courage. And you know what, this can work. This can really be a helpful mantra. Like, I don't want to disparage this. Like, fake confidence is pretty much indistinguishable from real confidence. And sometimes if you fake the confidence, you believe you can do something, you do it, you realize it wasn't that bad, your comfort zone expands. Brilliant. And now you've got a new skill and a new experience. So I'm not trying to suggest that you shouldn't use this mantra. But I used it way too much and for way too long. And then what happens is that this shadow gets bigger and bigger. This projection of who you are gets bigger and bigger, and therefore who you really are, the little cat there, gets smaller and smaller. And this disconnect happens where you feel like a fraud. You feel like you're faking it all the time. nobody really knows you. You lose touch with other people because you're not putting out a real image for people to connect with. You're putting out a fake image. And then you lose touch with yourself as well because you don't realize what you actually need and you're not listening to what you actually need. So, real courage, as defined by Brené Brown still, is being vulnerable and wholehearted. And she takes this from the Latin meaning of the word cur, which means heart. That's where courage comes from, and it means being able to tell a story of who you are with your whole heart. That's courage, that's bravery. Tell a story of who you are with your whole heart. Live, and she calls it, in a wholehearted way. And so that means asking for help. That means saying that you're struggling. That means admitting that you did a horrible thing and asking for somebody's forgiveness. Like that's what courage is. Risking rejection in the seek of connection. Seeking the connection. And I have been trying to live that way a bit more for the last couple of years. And I think that one of the things that has surprised me the most, I mean, it's been transformational, is like not too much of an exaggeration to say it's been life-saving, and it's like just been the beginning of this. I've been doing it for like 3 of my 33 years, so I hope it will continue. But the thing that surprised me the most was that, if you remember at the beginning, I said I've been on the leadership team for 18 months. I thought that I had to be this perfect, emotionless, or at least not hysterical person to be taken seriously as a woman and to progress in my career. And it just hasn't proven true for me. That's not to say that it's not true. Like, it is true in a lot of industries. I've been very lucky in the company that I'm in and with the people that I'm with. But I do see it changing. And I do see a different kind of leadership coming through. And I think part of the reason as well that my career progression increased rather than decreased at the time when I actually took my foot off the gas and focused on myself and my family and my husband and my mental health, was because I also, around about that time, took a job in product. So I'd always been in research, so I was working client side. I was taking briefs, I was doing research, and I was leading a research team. You know, it's an area that I do very well. And I knew our customers, and I knew our industry, and I knew our data. And we were struggling to find good product people. Product is kind of an emerging discipline. There's a lot of people who claim to be product managers, but they're really terrible at it. There's a lot of huge egos in product. I joined product. I moved from being our research director to a VP of product, so it was like a sideways and a bit of a step up. But I moved from being a leader of a large global team to an individual contributor. So instead of organising other people's work, I had to do some on my own. And I also moved into a space where I was surrounded by people with the most terrifying of knowledge, and it's technical people. The kind of terrifying sense of being a dunce that comes when you are not a technical person and you are surrounded by technical people. The fear was huge. So I had to learn. I knew our industry and I knew our customers, but I didn't know anything about agile. I didn't know anything about anything to do with coding. I still can't code. I don't agree that you need to be able to code to be a product person, by the way. Some product people can code. Some of them can't. They're either a good or a bad product person, but there's no correlation. So I felt really stupid, and that was potentially a really bad thing with someone who was trying to live more vulnerably, because if you're stupid, then you go to project that big lie again, and you stop asking questions, you don't look stupid. But I really tried to persevere and ask the dumb question and ask for help. And I realized through time why none of the other heads of product at Brandwatch have been successful. On reflection, it's because they were always trying to be the smartest person in the room. They were always trying to be the person who had all the answers, everyone went to them, find out what we need to do, you're going to tell us everything, I don't have to think for myself. And they were encouraging that. And actually, I have found that enterprise software creation, is one of the most intensely collaborative exploits that you can attempt. It is literally impossible to do it without good UX research. We have one of our UX researchers here. Without good UX designers, without good back and front end developers. You cannot do it without collaboration. And your job as a product manager is to do two things. Number one, yes, have a basic vision for where we need to go, the problems we need to solve. Fall in love with the problem, not the answer. You know, that's what you need to do as a product manager. The other thing you need to do, and I think the most important thing you need to do, is set the tone in the room to allow for creativity. Because creativity is an intensely vulnerable thing. To take something that's come from my heart or my head or somewhere inside me, put it on the table and allow my peers to prod it and poke it and see if it's good, see if it's viable. Like, that is intensely vulnerable. And your job as a product manager is to encourage that vulnerability, to create the atmosphere, and the only way to do that is to model it. And so this is the product team. Oh, can I get it? Oh no. There we go. This is the product team that I have built over the last couple of years. There's actually 3 more people in it. But this was the last group shot because we're based across Brighton and Boston, so we don't get together that often. A couple of things to say about this team. You'll notice the gender balance. Now, I don't think that it's a coincidence that I've hired more women than men. We all have biases. My particular bias is to fill it with white women in their 20s and 30s, becoming a problem. The other thing to say about that is, it kind of spurred me to think about this. I was like, I think that our performance as a team has definitely gone up. I definitely have a propensity to hire women. Is that the reason why we're better at showing vulnerability now than we used to be as a product team? Are women better at this? I don't think so, actually. I think that there is an expectation that women are better at this, but we're not. It's painful and it's difficult and there are risks. And it's painful and difficult and there are risks for men to do it too. There's maybe different expectations. Maybe we're more likely to be expected to do it, but that's the reason there's risks. Because, like I said at the beginning, we're all worried that if we show too much emotion, we'll be put down as some hysterical woman who can't handle this. And men, if they do it, everyone's going to be so shocked. They won't know what to do. They'll think he's having a mental breakdown or something. So it's hard. It's not easy for anyone. So I wanted to kind of start to wrap up by talking about what does it actually mean to practice vulnerability in leadership. Vulnerability. So I'm using this sign here, which is the sign for congruence. Mathematical sign for congruence. Vulnerability is highly context specific. The vulnerability that you show with your partner or with your very best friends is going to be at another level, I hope, if you're going to get real connection, than you're going to get if you're with a colleague or if you're in a leadership situation. What's important about the word congruence is that it means you don't have to tell the whole truth, but you should tell nothing but the truth. So what I mean is, you don't have to say everything that's going on in your brain, everything that you're worried about, everything that could go wrong, to Joe's point. You know, she's holding more as a leader than she wants her team to hold, because she wants her team to be able to get on with their jobs. But what you do say should be authentic. If you're worried about something, you should be able to say, I'm concerned about this, I'm concerned that this is a risk, this might happen. That's vulnerability in leadership, because it also gives your team permission to come and solve the problem with you, rather than to wait for you to solve the problem. And the other reason that I like this sign, this kind of double meaning of congruence, my dad is probably going to correct me. I'm taking some artistic license, did a maths degree. Everyone is approximately equal. So I'm going to finish by coming back to what I said at the beginning, when my colleague told me that the reason I could speak is I was just like everyone else. I thought that was kind of good, kind of hard to hear. Nope, back. There we go. Pedestals. We love to put people on pedestals. We really enjoy it. One of the traps of perfectionism is it comes from low self-esteem, essentially. I have to be perfect in order to be worthy of connection. One of the traps of perfectionism is that you don't just crave connection, you crave admiration. in order to feel good about myself. An entire room full of people have to think I'm great. And so when I started doing this talk last year, I didn't really understand the kind of admiration I would get for doing this, like for standing up and talking about this. Like people were really, really admiring my courage to do this, and that was great, and it felt really genuinely good. I didn't just do it for the admiration, I genuinely felt good to help people and to share what I've learned. But it's also a trap, for me in particular, because it's very seductive, the idea of being perfectly imperfect, and absolutely mastered imperfection, to the point that rooms full of people will admire you for it. So, the temptation to leave the talk there is really, really strong, but I'm not going to. Okay, so the last thing I want to say is that we have this idea, this is an actual mug you can buy, that it's desirable to work hard and to make something look easy. That we should make something seem easy, and then it's kind of sexy and exciting. And like that can be nice in a way, it might inspire other people to try something. But I think it's a trap, because if I stood up here and said that it was easy to be a young woman on a leadership team who talks about vulnerability, I'd be lying. And then if you tried it, you might find it hard, and you might think that the reason you can't do it is because there's something wrong with you. And then you feel maybe ashamed. So what I'm going to do instead is show you just how hard it is, and I'm going to do that by showing you a picture of the back of my head. So this is a picture of the back of my head, about 18 months ago. It's growing back, but that breakdown I had really hurt. And actually, this, my hair didn't fall out until after the worst of it. My hair fell out when I started confronting what caused my problems, not when I was in the midst of them. Because confronting your issues and talking about them is really stressful, and it's really hard. So why am I showing you this? It's not to discourage you from trying, it's not to discourage you from starting to try and live in this way. It's so that when you do, if you do, and I hope you do, try some of these techniques, you won't feel like a failure if it's hard, because it's going to be hard. And the last thing that I want to say is if there's one piece of advice that I could give that I feel comfortable that I have the right to give. Oh no, it's not Tom Hanks. Everyone should use that gift. That's my last piece of advice. There we go. Never stop getting to know yourself. So all of those frameworks, they help. That academic kind of idea, the understanding that you're plugging into a system and, you know, everybody's got shame, this is what courage looks like, that all helps. But like fundamentally, my journey will be completely different from yours. And this is what we need to do. So the most impactful thing for me was to understand what was driving my perfectionism, what was driving my decision making, what were my needs, really, what were my needs, so that I could try and stop making decisions that actually tripped me up. Try and start seeking things that I didn't actually need or want, and ignoring the things I did need or want. And that's going to be different for every single person, and there isn't a right or wrong answer. And the last thing to say is that it also never stops. So you don't reach a point where you've mastered it and it's done, because you're going to keep changing, and your life situation is going to keep changing. So we'll never be finished, none of us will ever be finished, and none of us will ever be perfect. But that's okay. Thank you.